Welcome to our educational video on the Good Enough Caregiver. Hello, my name is Claire Edmonds. Welcome to our series of educational videos created by Wellspring in partnership with Pancreatic Cancer Canada. In this session, we'll be talking about being a good enough caregiver. For many, being a caregiver is one of the hardest roles. And in some ways, it's an impossible task. One caregiver told me that the skill he needed the most as a caregiver was to be a mind reader. At times, being a caregiver can feel easy. You and your loved one are in sync. It's fairly easy to know how to help. But other times, especially when your loved one is feeling unwell or in pain, it can be hard to know what to do, how to fix it. And sometimes caregivers judge themselves for not being better at it. Caregiving is complex, difficult, and something that very few of us have been trained for. Caregiving is also working with a forever moving target. A small example might be food. Yesterday, she only wanted applesauce, so I made organic applesauce just for her. But today, she won't have any of it. She only wants soup. I didn't make any soup. It's so hard to get it right. And even the most conscientious, loving caregiver, there are going to be times when the ball is dropped or needs are unmet. I like this cat and his box. He's trying to catch the finger, and it's like whack-a-mole. It keeps moving. It's a moving target. And to me, caregiving feels a lot like that. Caregiving is never perfect. That's an impossible goal. Caregivers are doing the best they can in the moment, and that's going to depend on many factors, including their own energy and all those other stressors. It's not like the whole world says to a caregiver, "No worries, we'll take care of the day-to-day issues like work and finances, children, other family members, elderly parents, laundry, groceries, cooking, while you take care of your loved one." No, that's not how it works. In fact, the daily pressures are going to feel much bigger when there's caregiving to do. Being a good enough caregiver is sometimes the best we can do. Here's what the literature is saying about the needs of caregivers working with cancer patients. Caregivers experience a tsunami of needs. Caregivers come from a wide range of relationships. It can be a relative, a spouse, a partner, a friend, even a neighbor. And caregivers provide a broad range of assistance, from physical care and practical assistance, emotional support, nutrition, sometimes spiritual support, symptom management, housekeeping, transportation. The list really does go on and on. 74% of caregivers live within 20 minutes of the patient and provide on average 20 hours of support a week. Imagine the stress of having to travel to see the person that you're taking care of. Many other caregivers live in the home. There are many levels of physical strain, emotional strain, financial hardships for caregivers of patients, particularly with pancreatic cancer, and they are more challenging than those of caregivers of elderly patients or diabetic patients. Caregivers are distressed by a variety of the acute medical conditions the patient may experience. Surgery itself creates big changes and often leaves the patient quite weak. Chemotherapy is an ongoing challenge. Again, one of those moving target things where we're trying to manage the side effects and we're trying to manage other medications to make it work. Radiation has its challenges. There's catheter care. Often people who are on chemotherapy have a peripheral access place for their chemotherapy, which requires separate care. There's nausea and vomiting. profound fatigue, and bowel management, particularly when there is pain management going on at the same time. And in cases of advanced cancer, there are compressed timelines when caregivers must manage patient needs as well as their own full range of feelings and stressors. They must support their loved one with a heavy burden of the symptoms from the disease and the treatment, all kinds of problems, all kinds of side effects, and it is very difficult. Let's talk a bit about fatigue. Fatigue limits the patient's participation in life, and perhaps it reminds the patient and the caregiver that they may perhaps be getting weaker. Appetite is a big issue for families and caregivers. A decrease in appetite is a hard reality to accept because it is the loss of an enjoyable activity and the opportunity to share meals with family. Caregivers may understand intellectually that the patient is not hungry, but they feel the need to push their loved ones to eat. Food equals love, and it's often seen as a progression of the illness if patients don't eat. It may also be at some level, it may seem that eating is under the patient's control. Eat or not eat, just try. Food reflects the caregiver's desire to will their loved ones into health. It's hard to accept that food and drink may actually increase their suffering at times. And sometimes a power struggle may develop around food, and the caregiver may feel exhausted and frustrated when they try all sorts of food only to be rebuffed. One of the things that I do in my work is I make home visits to families where somebody is in palliative care. And I often come in and find little pots of lovingly created food along the edge beside the bed. The patient's turning their head away from it, and the caregiver's frustrated and sad. Pain. Well, pain is a big issue for caregivers, and it can bring feelings of great helplessness in terms of controlling it. Pain also limits contact. It's hard to hug or cuddle somebody who is physically uncomfortable. There are lots of approaches to pain: physical, emotional, social, and spiritual. But primarily, we take a pharmacological approach to pain management, and we need good communication around pain. That means that the caregiver and the patient are able to have an honest conversation about the pain, how bad it is, perhaps on a scale of 1 to 10. And then that information has to be shared with the healthcare team over here so that actual changes in medication can take place. Sometimes even creative solutions can emerge. So communication around pain, while very difficult, is very important. There are also complementary approaches to pain: energy work, Reiki, healing touch, acupuncture, music therapy, relaxation and guided imagery. Many things can be brought to bear to make things more comfortable. Another challenge is fear and anxiety. It's difficult to be present with a loved one's fear, especially when the caregiver is feeling it too. It can be overwhelming. And so many caregivers shut down these conversations, not because they don't care, but because they find it so hard to hear it. This is where support from social workers, chaplains, therapists, volunteers can all be very helpful to both the patient and the caregiver to talk about their feelings of fear and anxiety. Family and friends. Other family members may be very helpful. They may really know how to add to the team, and other families may not be so helpful. The other thing that can happen is patterns of frustration and stress and resentment don't usually get better under this kind of stress of having an ill family member. So there can be an exacerbation of old conflicts. And finally on the list are caregivers' own needs. Caregivers are on duty every hour of every day, and they must also manage their own emotions and stressors. And too often the caregiver is viewed as a member of the healthcare team rather than a person who is at risk and vulnerable. Families have the right to their own support and assessment of their needs, and not to be seen as the proxy for the patient. Medical people do not always respond or intervene in ways that take the caregiver into account. This stress puts caregivers at higher risk for physical illness and poor mental health.
Well, you have to make changes in your life. By that, I mean there are a lot of doctor appointments. I went to every doctor appointment. I took notes. I read the reports of the doctors. I spent a lot of time at home because of the fact that it took time. I said before that I read a lot of research reports online. That takes time. We tried to make sense of the doctor reports. That takes time. Once Joel started chemo, you have a period where you feel lousy. You just feel terrible. And I didn't feel like I wanted to go out of the house and leave Joel by himself.
So in the face of this tsunami of needs, how can a caregiver be perfect? How many people can live up to all these needs and be skillful in every moment, manage on little sleep and a lot of stress, translate medical orders into a family's life? The concept of the good enough caregiver can be helpful. What might it mean to be a good enough caregiver? Donald Winnicott, a pediatrician and psychoanalyst, understood parenthood as something more complex than either just good parenting or bad parenting. Winnicott developed the idea of the good enough parent. He used the term mother. A good enough mother is sincerely preoccupied with being a mother. She pays attention to her baby. She offers physical and emotional care. She provides security. And when she fails, she tries again, and she weathers painful feelings. She makes sacrifices. Winnicott's good enough mother is not so much a goddess. She's a gardener. She tends her baby with love, patience, effort, and care. But the good enough mother is also very human. She is a mother under pressure, under strain. She can be ambivalent about being a mother. She can be both selfless and self-interested. She turns towards her child and sometimes turns away. She is capable of great dedication, but she can also have feelings of resentment. Winnicott even dares to say that the good enough mother loves her child, but also has room to hate him at times. She's not boundless. She's real. Such a strikingly compassionate and spacious model. How might this concept of being good enough caregiver help us in this work? As caregivers ourselves, we may be more compassionate and spacious with ourselves as we struggle to be good enough in our various caregiver roles. We may be more forgiving of our own missteps with our loved ones, knowing that perfection is not attainable in most circumstances.
I just did the best job that I could. And I can remember sometimes going into the shower and letting myself cry. Not because I didn't think I wasn't doing a good enough job, but I suffered because he wasn't feeling well. He was really not having a good time of it after the chemo. The chemo was very, very difficult. But I didn't feel guilty about letting the feelings out. I think it was important. I wasn't going to just bottle them up. I let them out, had my cry, and then I would do whatever I had to do. So I never thought I wasn't good enough.
And importantly, we might also be more tolerant of other caregivers' attempts to get it right, or be more forgiving of their mistakes or challenges. And so the benefits of this model include reducing guilt, reducing self-judgment, reducing expectations and being more realistic, allowing for those feelings of frustration and anger. And this model can allow for resentment to be expressed in their conversations with you, the peer support volunteer. And remember that the expression and the acknowledgement of these feelings help us accept a difficult reality.
It's interesting. These are points that Deborah allowed me to see, which I think really speaks to what a wonderful caregiver she was. I knew that there were times when it was difficult. I'm not oblivious to that, but I'm so very grateful to the fact that she really stepped up to the plate. As far as I'm concerned, she's a model for what it is that a caregiver could be doing, and I'm always going to be very grateful for that.
The relationship between the caregiver and the patient is much longer than these months of caregiving. Remember, there's a story, there's a history prior to the diagnosis that is rich and complex. And these days of caregiving do not necessarily sum up the whole of the relationship. In many ways, it's only a part, a limited part of that relationship. So, how do we work towards becoming good enough? The first thing we have to do is ask for help. It's important to understand that not all people offer help in the same ways. Some people are sprinters. They're really good for short bursts of help. And they're usually really good early on in the experience when it feels more like a crisis. In the long haul, though, sometimes they disappear. Some friends are more like marathoners. They're good over the long haul. Often they're coming from their own experiences of needing support. They know that the story continues beyond when chemo finishes. Some people are good with instrumental support. These are the doers. They're the practical care people. They do the lawn, they shovel the snow, they walk the dog. They're really important. But some are good at emotional support. They're good listeners, and they don't judge or offer solutions too quickly. They understand the value of just talking about how you feel. Some people are master organizers, and they can be the captain of the team and organize care for you, like organizing a rotation of friends to give you drives to the hospital or meals on specific days. And some friends and family, maybe particularly the younger ones, are good researchers who are happy to look things up for you on the computer, on the web, identify local community support, or do medical online searches for you.
One of the things that we were blessed with is some friends in the building stepped up to the plate. They said, "We are driving you to chemo." In fact, when we couldn't get an MRI for several months at one of the hospitals, we were going to go to Buffalo to have an MRI. And they were going to go to Buffalo with us. If our daughter was not able to come to New York to be with Deborah, Linda, our friend, was going to go down to New York and stay with Deborah and be with Deborah. Now sometimes you can't even get family to be that way. So that really is marvelous. We had other people who would actually drive us when they couldn't do it. Other people would drive us.
People who made food for us. And one of the questions was, how did we select our support system? We didn't select it. They selected us. And they stepped up. And these weren't long-term. These weren't people that we knew, let's say, from childhood or from early years of marriage. These were people that we had met in the condo. Maybe we knew them 5 years before. They said, "No, you're family, and we're going to help you."
Asking for help is something of an art. And I think it's important to make a match between what you know about the person and the kind of help that you need. Our sprinters are good in the short run. Marathoners are good in the long run. Instrumental carers are good with practical issues. Emotional supporters are good with emotional issues. Try to find a match between what your needs are and the skills and talents of the people around you. I sometimes think of asking help as asking for small bites. Lots of people offer help in a general sort of way. Hey, let me know if I can help. With these people, it's initially good to ask for a small, specific, short-term task. I was wondering if you could pick up a few groceries for me the next time you're out. You could just give me a call. You know, Bob, the lawn is growing like crazy. I just can't get around to it. Do you think you could cut the lawn when you cut yours? You know, I've got so much laundry and I just can't get around to folding it. Would you be able to help me with that? Next Wednesday, we need a lift to the hospital. I'm wondering if you'd be available for that. Could you make us a really simple meal for next Friday? We have chemo that day and I'm not going to get around to it. I'm wondering if you could just visit Bob while I go to the library for a break. I just need a walk. Small bites feel doable because you're not asking the person to commit for a long-term task. I also think it's important to thank them. A small supply of thank you notes can help. Just a quick thanks is all it takes to express appreciation, and it encourages people to be helpful in the future because you're telling them that, hey, you're getting it right. And that's what a lot of people fear. I don't want to step in, get in the way, or make a mistake. And if they start with a small bite and they feel successful, they'll come back for more. They may come back to help you with other tasks.
I decided to develop a support group of about 60 people, and after all of my CAT scans, I would actually send them a message about what's going on. And I'd get feedback from them, which was always good. In fact, when I don't get feedback, I get a little annoyed. Why aren't they responding back to me? This is what I need. But it really was interesting because at one point I put down the question, am I being a little bit too technical with regard to things? And people said, no, you're teaching us, you're educating us. And so I've continued with the support group. I've just recently had my 3-year CAT scan, which was still cancer-free. And I sent out the message to people, and they said, keep those cards and letters coming. So I keep that. That's another form of support group that really I think was helpful. And I've suggested that to people, that they really should reach out to people that they know, friends and family, and let them know what's going on.
We also need to learn to ask for help from the medical team. And I think it's important to view the team as just that. It's a team of people, and knowing that each member of that team has a specialty. Doctors have their own skills. They're good with medical questions, questions related to the disease and its treatment, as well as medications. But nurses, they're wonderfully practical and can help with things that the doctors may not regularly deal with, like constipation, diarrhea, sleep issues, quality of living. And remember too that there are different types of nurses. There's the clinic nurse. She has a skill set. Chemotherapy nurses, they're specialists. Nurses in radiation, the PICC line nurse, or the nurse that deals with the lines, the central lines. And home visit nurses, they're pretty spectacular for the practical issues in the home. Don't forget the pharmacist. Pharmacists know a lot about medications and side effects. And I suggest trying to get all your medications from the same pharmacy so that they can watch for the interactions of various medications. They can also facilitate conversations with your doctor if a medication needs to be changed. They know a lot about side effects and how to manage them. Dieticians are also helpful. They're specialists in helping families and patients manage food issues. They can help you find ways to increase calorie intake without increasing the amount of food. For instance, using cream and butter instead of margarine and skim milk. There are also books that can help, like Goes Down Easy. It's written by dietitians at the Princess Margaret Cancer Center. There are lots of different books that you can find helpful. Social workers, they're usually on the team as well, and they can help you with a wide range of issues such as emotional support for the caregiver and patient, as well as other members of your family, helping you get disability support from government agencies, practical problem solving. There's hospital clergy who can offer emotional and spiritual support, and psychologists and psychiatrists who are also there for psychosocial care for the patient and caregiver. Wellspring has programs too that can help, such as Money Matters Online and peer support for caregivers. I know that you probably do this already, but it's helpful to keep a notebook and a diary of events. The events and the questions that you can give your medical team so that there's accurate information about what is happening for the patient. For example, Bob had pain in the middle of the night for 3 days in a row, and the pain medication took an awful long time to work. What should we do about that? And also recording the time and the doses of medications is really helpful, and it reduces confusion. And in being a good enough caregiver, it's really important to think about taking time out. Ironically, one of the most important things that you need as a caregiver is the last thing on your list. Taking time out for yourself is perhaps the hardest thing to do when someone you care about is ill. But the quality of care that you have to give is related to the amount of care you allow yourself.
We had a dog, and I was mainly the person who walked the dog. 4 times a day I was out. And we have a small parquet that is near our condo. And sometimes I would just take Sarah out and sit on a bench and enjoy the flowers in the parquet and just have a quiet time for myself.
It's important to ask yourself, what restores your spirit? Do you like walking? How about exercising? Have you tried journaling? Do you have friends that are really good at emotional support? Talking to them, taking time out with them, going for coffee. How about watching a funny movie? Listening to music, or if you're talented, making music. Knitting, doing a jigsaw puzzle. The list can be endless, and everybody's list is unique to themselves. We know patients often feel better knowing that their loved ones are taking care of themselves. This is not selfish. It's the fuel that lets you give care to others. So in finishing, caregiving is hard work, but there are resources for you to call on. Friends, your medical team, talking to a peer support volunteer at Wellspring. Know that caregiving is a marathon, not a sprint. Learn how to ask for help in small bites and then perhaps larger bites as you go along. And know that there are different kinds of support from different people. Practical or instrumental help, emotional help. We have our sprinters and we have our marathoners. We have super managers who can organize other people to help you, and those people who are particularly happy at researching. And finally, take the time to take care of yourself, even if only for a few minutes a day. I'm so glad that you could take the time to join us today, and we wish you and your loved ones all the best.